Joy Pepper, thank you very much for joining me. It is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we have to sort of give the caveat that we don't have a final agreement yet at this point, but what we do know, and we know quite a bit actually in the education sector, is, in your opinion and in Upstate Charter School advocates' opinion, not good for charters north of New York City, correct?
Correct. There's an educational crisis in Buffalo, and charters are one way that we can serve the population. And if we're underfunded, then we are handicapped to do our job.
So what exactly is the problem, as you see it, in what you have understood to be the agreement in Albany?
We were led to believe that the budget would be unfrozen so that our funding would continue with a gradual growth, which would mean that each charter child would get an additional $440 per year, and that next year we would be back to negotiations to see where that growth would be. We also were led to believe that there would be additional funding for facilities, which we have never had in the past, and we were very excited about, because a third of our money still stays with the district that we are housed in. So Buffalo still gets more than $6,000 for every one of our students that they're not educating. And if I have 800 kids times $6,000, that's a lot of money that's going into Buffalo's pocket and not for these students. So we were led to believe that in this budget cycle, there's no facilities funding. So that got cut out of the mix altogether. And now they're talking about giving us $1,100 over 3 years, with only $250 more this year. I mean, that's very short-sighted.
So,
every expense increases.
Right, of course. So when you say we were led to believe, I mean, what does that mean exactly? Who was it who led you to believe that, in fact, you would do better than it appears that you're doing?
So there is a Northeast Charter Schools Association that has lobbyists in Albany. We sent students and faculty and parents to Albany in March. We spoke on the steps of the Capitol concerning this, and the governor came and spoke at that rally, and there were 11,000 kids there. And in his statements, we thought that that meant, when he was endorsing charter schools as good alternatives to the traditional public schools, that we would get more money, that we would get some funding. Since the original formula, when it was created in 1998, it didn't create equity. It didn't give us the chance to be able to take all the money, that the money should follow the kids, like it does in other states. Massachusetts, you go to a charter school, you get the same money as if you go to a traditional public school.
Right.
And so it's a difficult thing for us, because it's hard to manage and it's hard to do a better job when your hands are tied behind your back and you don't have all the money that you need to meet the best needs of the kids.
My understanding is that on average, charter schools receive about 30% less per pupil. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What I guess the interesting thing is that, as I understand it, though, is that there is a divide, as usual, between upstate and down. And the focus of the administration has been really like a laser on the downstate charters because of the rift between New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and, in particular, Success Academy CEO Eva Moskowitz. And this whole question of co-location was also a big issue, but that's not a problem upstate. Upstate has different problems, and those problems, it seems to me, weren't addressed.
Exactly. I think the co-location issue, in New York, the real estate is much more expensive and obviously much more limited. And the fact that Success charter schools, that there's multiples of them, that's one of the few examples where charter schools were doing a really good service to kids, and the waiting list was so high that they said, oh, let's make another one, let's replicate. And then they had another waiting list, and it was so high they said, okay, let's make another one. Tapestry Charter School has also been asked to replicate. So have some of the other schools in Western New York. And if you're doing a good job, you may become a bigger, you may become a charter school corporation. But most of the charter schools in Western New York, in fact, I think at this point, all of them, we're one-offs. There's one of us. We are our own school district. We were founded by people who are passionate about education, and we are not corporate entities. And we don't have big backers, and we don't have banks even who will necessarily support buildings that we've either purchased or that we're renting from. So it's a hugely difficult issue to not have additional facilities funding or to even get the appropriate amount of funding for each child who's in our house. Kids will stay in Buffalo because there's educational opportunities for, there's different choices because there are charters. If you don't have, the Buffalo Billion, if you can't keep the workforce being educated in this city, and charters are one choice, then they should, how is the strength of the city going to stay going on? It's like they need charters as an alternative.
It also seems, though, that, and again, this is what we understand at this point, is that the funding formula, which you already mentioned that you found to be inequitable and puts you at a 30% disadvantage compared to regular public schools, has been tweaked still further such that New York City has an advantage and upstate actually loses money. So I guess the question is, how did that happen? I mean, it seems to be in a purely cynical way, entirely political and nothing to do at all about education policy.
We have, I've been doing this for 13 years. I'm one of the founders of our school, and we started in 2001. I have found it, in a cynical way, to be no different every single year. It is a very political thing, and it's a very last-minute thing. I mean, even the legislators who are our own legislators, some of whom have had kids in our school or who have come to our school and said, we're in support of charters, we're in support of educational alternatives for the city of Buffalo, then have gone back to the Senate or the Assembly and not been able to support us. So it's a lot of horse trading that goes on, and I think that's what happens in Albany, and we just happen to, we always hope that it's going to be different, but unfortunately every year it's a similar situation. I mean, we were frozen for many years, and so I'm not surprised that downstate, whose voices are louder and who represents a larger population, has been able to push this to perhaps gain more momentum for monies than the Western New York contingent was able to pull off.
What about this issue of auditing? I mean, it seems to me that auditing is now part of this agreement. My understanding of the original charter policy that was negotiated when the cap was lifted was that there was to be some auditing, and then subsequently it was fought. There was a lawsuit which the New York City charters, I believe, won, that they didn't want to be audited. Now there's an agreement that they will be audited, either by the New York City comptroller or by the state comptroller. Are you open to auditing?
We are absolutely open to auditing. We, as a charter school entity from the Charter Schools Institute, we are audited every single year. In addition to that, this past year, we were audited by the comptroller's office. It was like a double audit because we already were audited. Every charter school has within its license has to be audited. So it was, in a way, I thought it was taxpayers wasted money because we got audited a second time, and we came out, we had no problem with our audit because it had been done in November, and then it was done again. So I don't know why it would be an issue. I know certainly we're a public entity. Our books are open.
And where do you fall, or how did you fare, I should say? And again, we don't know all the details, but in the pre-K situation.
So I am not sure if charter schools got approved to do preschool education, which of course would be very advantageous. If you're trying to implement the new standards, the Common Core, you really want to meet kids where they are starting to need to be educated in a school setting. And pre-K is a wonderful opportunity for young children to come in and start to gain literacy skills and social skills. So we would love to have a preschool part of Tapestry Charter School. We are a K-12 program. I think all of the schools in Buffalo would love to have, take their kids at pre-K at 4 years old rather than at kindergarten, so that we can best meet their needs as well as meet the needs of, or meet the criteria that's set before us by the new Common Core.
Well, as we understand it at the moment, it's $340 million for pre-K, and only $40 million of that goes to outside New York City, which is really not a lot. Again, we're going to be discussing these details when we have them, and we're just working off what we know at the moment. So, Joy, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.